The company owner was about to go bankrupt, but an intern's 3 words made him fall to his knees. Michael Davenport stood in his grand yet eerily quiet office, staring at the dim city skyline. His company, Davenport Industries, had once been a beacon of success, a titan in the business world. But now, it was crumbling, falling apart like a sandcastle washed away by relentless waves. The weight of impending failure pressed on his chest. A stack of unpaid bills, resignation letters from his best employees, and rejection emails from every investor he had reached out to lay scattered across his mahogany desk. The empire he had built with sweat and sacrifice was disintegrating before his eyes. A sharp knock at the door startled him. He turned to see James, his CFO, wearing a grim expression. "It's bad, Michael," James muttered. "We're out of time." Michael exhaled heavily. He had tried everything: cost-cutting, restructuring, even liquidating some of his personal assets. Nothing had worked. He was at the end of the road. "Call an all-hands meeting," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell them it's over." As James left to gather the remaining employees, Michael collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. How had it come to this? The door creaked open again, but it wasn't James. A timid voice broke the silence. "Mr. Davenport?" Michael looked up to see a young intern standing hesitantly at the doorway. Her name was Lily, quiet, observant, often unnoticed in the bustling office. "What is it, Lily?" he asked, exhausted. She took a hesitant step forward, clutching a small notebook. Her eyes held something different from pity, something closer to unwavering belief. She inhaled deeply and, with conviction, said 3 words that made Michael fall to his knees. "Remember why started." Michael's breath hitched as the words echoed in his mind. Remember why started. He hadn't even noticed he had dropped to his knees. His hands trembled as they gripped the edges of his desk. The weight of those 3 words pressed against his chest, not like a burden, but like a reminder of something buried deep inside him. Lily stood frozen, unsure if she had crossed a line. She had been an intern for only a few months, working in the background while chaos consumed the company. But she had seen something in Michael that no one else had, a man who had once fought for something greater than profits and shareholders. Michael's throat tightened. He could barely find his voice. "Why did you say that?" he whispered. Lily hesitated before answering. "Because I've been watching you, Mr. Davenport. You built something incredible. But somewhere along the way, you forgot." A silence stretched between them. For the first time in months, Michael felt something break through the fog of hopelessness. A memory. 20 years ago. A young, ambitious Michael sat in his tiny apartment, surrounded by blueprints, business plans, and a second-hand laptop that barely worked. His heart pounded with excitement. "This is it," he whispered to himself. "This is how I change everything." He wasn't thinking about millions of dollars or stock prices back then. His only goal was simple: to create something that mattered. His company had started with one idea: to help small businesses streamline their operations through technology. It was never about greed. It was about impact. He had fought through sleepless nights, rejection after rejection, and the crushing doubt that crept in every time he failed. But he had never given up. And now he was about to walk away. Back to the present. Michael's fingers clenched into fists. He lifted his head, his weary eyes locking onto Lily's. He took a shaky breath. "You have no idea what you just did." Lily's eyes widened. "Did I say something wrong?" "No," Michael let out a soft, almost disbelieving chuckle. "You said something right." The exhaustion in his body hadn't vanished, but something had shifted, a spark reignited in the darkness. The all-hands meeting was still scheduled. But now, instead of announcing the company's closure, Michael had one last fight left in him. Michael pushed himself off the floor, his heart pounding, not with fear this time, but with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Lily watched him cautiously, unsure of what was happening in his mind. Michael straightened his tie, squared his shoulders, and turned toward her. "Thank you, Lily," he said, his voice steadier now. "I think you just saved this company." Her eyes widened. "I did." Michael exhaled. I don't know how, but I'm not giving up. Not yet. He grabbed his phone and dialed James, his CFO. The line clicked. Michael, we're ready in the conference room, James said grimly. Are you on your way? Michael glanced at Lily, then back at his desk, the mess of unpaid invoices, rejection letters, and failed strategies. Then, without hesitation, he swept them all into the trash. I'll be there in 5 minutes, he said. But we're not shutting down. We're fighting back. James was silent for a long moment. Michael. His voice was hesitant. We don't have a plan. Michael smiled, just slightly. Then we're about to make one. The conference room. The air was thick with tension. Employees sat in silence, most of them expecting bad news. Whispers spread through the room. Some were already thinking about their next jobs, their exit strategies. James stood near the front, flipping through a folder filled with financial reports, looking as if he had already accepted defeat. Then the doors swung open. Michael walked in, not like a defeated man, but like a leader with fire in his eyes. He strode to the front, glanced at the tired, frustrated faces before him, and took a deep breath. I know why you're all here, he began. You think I'm going to tell you that it's over. That Davenport Industries is finished. No one spoke, but the looks on their faces said it all. That's exactly what they were expecting. Michael shook his head. But that's not what's happening today. A murmur rippled through the crowd. James blinked in confusion. Michael continued, his voice gaining strength. I'll be honest with you. We're in trouble. We're in debt, our investors have backed out, and the world thinks we've already lost. But do you know what I just remembered? He paused, scanning the room. I remembered why we started. His words hung in the air. Some employees exchanged glances. Others leaned forward, listening more intently now. Michael's voice softened but held unwavering conviction. We didn't build this company to chase profits or impress investors. We built it because we believed in something. We believed in making life easier for small businesses, for the underdogs. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. And that's on me. A heavy silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, James spoke. So, what now? Michael turned to him, then to the entire room. Now, he said, we do the impossible. After the meeting, Michael gathered a small team in his office. James, a few senior employees, and Lily, who sat quietly in the corner, unsure why she was even included. All right, James said, rubbing his temples. We've heard the speech, but let's be real. What's our actual plan? Michael leaned forward, a determined glint in his eye. We go back to our roots, he said. We stop chasing the big investors and focus on the people who actually need us. Small businesses. One of the executives frowned. That's great in theory, Michael, but it doesn't fix our immediate problem. We need money now. Michael nodded. Then we find it. James scoffed. We've already tried. No bank is giving us a loan. Michael turned to Lily. What would you do? Lily's eyes widened. Me? Yes. If you were in my position, what would you do? She hesitated, looking around at the experienced executives who probably knew 10 times more about business than she did. But then she took a deep breath and spoke. Well, what if we crowdfund? The room fell silent. James raised an eyebrow. You want us to beg for donations? Lily shook her head quickly. No, not donations. Pre-orders. If we can get small businesses to believe in what we're doing, they might be willing to pay for our product in advance. It won't solve everything, but it could buy us time. Michael stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. Brilliant, he murmured. The executives looked skeptical, but Michael wasn't. For the first time in a long time, he saw a way forward. The fight wasn't over yet. The next morning, the office buzzed with a new kind of energy, hope. Employees who had been packing their desks now sat at their computers, typing furiously. The marketing team brainstormed strategies, the developers worked overtime to refine their product, and James, despite his initial doubts, spent hours crunching numbers to figure out exactly how much they needed to survive. At the center of it all was Michael. He was no longer the exhausted, defeated man who had been ready to give up. He was the founder again. And beside him was Lily. Though she was just an intern, Michael had insisted she be part of every meeting. She had reminded him of something he had forgotten, and now he wanted to hear her thoughts on everything. "All right," James said, slapping a document onto the table. "If we can raise $500,000 in the next 2 weeks, we'll have enough to keep the lights on and fulfill early pre-orders." Michael nodded. "Then that's our target." Lily raised a hand hesitantly. "And how do we convince people to trust us again?" Michael smiled. "By telling them the truth." That afternoon, the company's small media team set up a simple camera in Michael's office. There were no fancy scripts, no overproduced graphics, just Michael, speaking from the heart. He stared into the camera, took a deep breath, and began. "I won't lie to you. Our company is in trouble. We made mistakes. We lost sight of what mattered. And because of that, we're on the verge of shutting down. But I started this company for a reason. To help small businesses. To make things easier for the dreamers, the risk-takers, the people who want to build something of their own. I forgot that. But today, I remember." He leaned forward. "We're not asking for donations. We're not asking for pity. We're asking for a chance. If you believe in what we're doing, if you still think our product can help you, pre-order today. Help us keep this dream alive." He paused, then added with a small, grateful smile. "And if you've ever lost hope, just remember 3 words. Remember why started." The video was uploaded that night. The team didn't expect much, maybe a few hundred views, a handful of supportive messages. But then, something incredible happened. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire. Small business owners who had once been loyal customers shared it. Entrepreneurs who had been inspired by Michael's journey commented. And complete strangers, moved by the honesty in his voice, donated. By midnight, they had $50,000. By the next morning, $200,000. And by the end of the first week, $700,000. They had done it. The company was saved. As the final numbers rolled in, Michael sat at his desk, staring at the screen. He had expected relief. He had expected excitement. But what he felt was gratitude. Lily knocked on the door, peeking inside. "Mr. Davenport?" Michael looked up and grinned. "Lily, get in here." She stepped inside, still hesitant. It worked. Michael stood up, walked over, and, without warning, hugged her. "You saved this company," he said. "You saved me." Lily laughed nervously. "I just reminded you." Michael pulled back, nodding. "And sometimes, that's all we need." Davenport Industries was no longer on the brink of collapse. It was thriving. Investors who had once backed out now begged to return. Employees who had nearly quit were now proud to work there. And the customers, the very people they had almost forgotten, were at the heart of everything they did. And as for Lily, she was no longer an intern. She was the youngest executive in the company's history. And every time Michael faced a tough decision, every time things seemed uncertain, he would turn to her and ask, "Lily, what would you do?" Because she had given him something no investor, no financial expert, no consultant ever could. She had given him back his why. And that changed everything.